Here we go. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first edition of the Alberta Softball Umpires Association webinar series. We are starting off with Fastpitch legal and illegal pitching. This was a very deliberate choice in topics for our first go around with education in this setting. There were, in my observations from last season, a lot of issues at all levels with the enforcement of the new pause regulation. And since we are now in the second year of that, Kris and I thought it would be helpful to spend some time talking about this for our first educational series. So with that in mind, our agenda for this evening, I'm going to run through a couple of housekeeping things, do some introductions, talk about where the fast pitch rule is. We're going to do the illegal pitch mechanic, talk about the penalty enforcement. Kris is going to talk about mindset and philosophy and go through some legal and illegal pitching examples. And then I will close us off with the point of emphasis for this year. And we will have a question and answer period. So with that in mind, the housekeeping things, we've booked this webinar for a full hour, but we anticipate we want to keep you engaged, so we don't want to be speaking for a full 60 minutes. Kris and I have committed to trying to get all of the content done within 30 minutes and give you 10 to 20 minutes to ask questions. Everyone is muted so that we have the opportunity to not get feedback from people's areas where they are. But also, if you do have questions, you should see on the right-hand side a place called chat, and you can input your questions there, and Kris and I will answer them in the question and answer period. All right, with no further ado, we will get right to it. So, I'd like you to meet your Alberta Softball Umpire Association's education co-chairs. My name is Frankie Billingsley. There's a picture of me on your screen and the credentials that I've earned and the year I earned them in. And Kris Hartley is my partner in crime, and his picture is on the screen below with one of our other officials from Calgary, Emma. So Kris and I will be facilitating some of your education over the next, well, we've been working together for a year, and we'll be working together hopefully for a long time. So, if you did not know this already, we are covering some of the content that is in Rule 6 in the Softball Canada Rulebook, and we will be covering some of the fast pitch content tonight. I think it's really important that people understand that you have different responsibilities based on the position that you take up in the game. If you are the plate umpire, it is your responsibility to ensure that you are adjudicating illegal pitches with regard to these three areas. If the pitcher takes the signal or appears to take the signal with the hands together, this is an infraction. If the pitcher lands outside of the 24-inch chute with the pivot foot, this is an infraction. If they have a pause violation, it is the plate umpire's responsibility to call that. The base umpires, on the other hand, are responsible for foot violations. If they step back after they have already taken a pause, if they step forward, if they are rocking backwards, and if in the U14 and below category, the pitcher leaps. These are all of the base umpire's responsibilities. The illegal pitch mechanic that Softball Canada would like us to use on the first infraction. You call time and warn the pitcher. It is really important that you communicate with your partner the reason for the warning. It's important that everyone on your officiating crew understands why the pitcher has been warned for something. I think it is important to give the coach an opportunity to come out so he or she is also aware of what the warning is for. On the second and subsequent occurrence of the same infraction, as soon as you see that infraction, we verbalize illegal pitch, loud enough for the nearest fielder to hear. We raise our left arm at a 90-degree angle, extended outward from the shoulder with our fist closed. There's a picture in the top corner of the slide to kind of show you what that should look like. And it's really important to note that for every different infraction that a pitcher engages in, they must be issued a warning for each different infraction. So technically, a plate umpire could issue a warning for landing outside the chute. That could be a warning. And then as soon as you see another one, it's an illegal pitch. And then you could issue a warning for no pause. And then you could have an illegal pitch for that as well. The penalties for an illegal pitch. So when a pitcher has committed an illegal action, the penalty is the following. It is a delayed dead ball because the ball is live. We don't want to kill the play because we want to allow the offense to continue having the opportunity to succeed. If the pitch is not hit, a ball is awarded to the batter and all runners advance one base. It's important to note that runners are protected from one base from the time of the pitch. If they obtain more than that on the illegal pitch, they can keep them. But it's also important to note that if they're thrown out, they're out. If the illegal pitch is hit, the offensive manager has the option of taking the award of the illegal pitch or the result of the play. So this is important because even though the hit may have been caught, the coach may actually want to take the result of the play if a run scores. There is an exception, though. If the batter becomes a runner due to the dropped third strike or the ball is hit and all runners advance one base, including the batter, the illegal pitch is nullified and no option is given. When an illegal pitch hits the batter, the ball is dead, the batter is awarded first, and all runners advance one base. No option is given in this situation. And Kris, it's over to you. Kris, I don't think anyone can hear you.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
All right. Sorry about that. So the mindset and philosophy that we want to look at as umpires is when we're on the field, we want to look for the pitch to be legal, not for the illegal. We know what pitchers can do. So if they don't do one of the things that they can do, then obviously it's got to be illegal. And that's when you would enforce the penalty. So some examples might be the non-pivot foot must land on or within the 24-inch wide rubber or the chute. So if you're the plate umpire and you notice that the non-pivot foot is landing outside of the 24-inch width, then you know that we now have an illegal pitch infraction, and you enforce and use the mechanic that we've already discussed. One thing to think about is that it may or may not happen every pitch of the game. So umpires really need to focus every pitch. Where we see this sometimes is a starting pitcher who is later in the game, he's getting tired or she's getting tired, and they're wanting that little bit extra. They might try and cheat a little bit by getting that little step forward or that little bit of extra oomph behind their pitch. And that's when you need to be prepared for the infraction to happen. So it may not happen every single pitch. It might just be intermittent, and you need to be prepared for that. Some other general tips, or from a mindset thing, is obviously, if you're doing pitching U14 and down, they have to push and drag. So just when you go to quickly sweep the rubber, just take a quick glance down at the dirt as you're sweeping the rubber to see if there is a continuous drag mark. If there isn't, then there's probably a bit of a leap or a little bit of a illegal pitch potentially occurring for the next time they come out. If there's a hole or trench on the mound from the pitchers continuously dragging, as we all know, a lot of the fields we work on, they start to dig a bit of a hole or a trench. And the pitcher keeps their toe pointed down through the whole process and near the ground level. Kind of a rule of thumb is to not call that illegal, because obviously we're not down at ground level with a level playing field every pitch. And we need to give them the benefit of the doubt on those ones, because they're not trying to gain advantage in that case. And the big point at the end there is that these are bet your life type of calls. So if you're not 100% sure, don't call it. You need to be sure that you did see what you saw in order to make that call. So here's a little bit specifically about U14 and below pitching rule. The pitchers at these categories need to step onto the rubber with their hands separated. They need to have 2 feet on the rubber and push and drag towards home plate. New this year, we got clarification in the last week from Jeff Whipple that U14 and above, all levels of U14 and down as well as up must have a 2 to 5 second pause this year. So that is something different than previously. So they must have the 2 to 5 second pause where their bodies stopped entirely. And obviously they cannot leap, step back, or step forward. They must push and drag once they separate their hands and start their motion.
Kris, just before you go on, I just wanted to say the reason it was important to ensure that we have clarification from Jeff Whipple is because there was a rules document that was put out early this year that did not have that as part of it. And when the rule book came out, we just wanted to make sure we had the correct information.
Correct. Obviously at U16 and above for male and female fast pitch, the pitching rule is been adopted much like it was last year. Was a trial run, but last year the trial run was for male only at U16. This year it's U16 male and female. And again, of course, the pivot foot or the non-stepping foot must remain in contact with the pitcher's plate prior to the start of the pitch. They can't lift it up or rock back or try and get any advantage that way. And return it to the plate. That would be illegal. Obviously, after they take the signal, the pitcher must bring their whole body to this 2 to 5 second pause, like we've already talked about. And it must be a complete stop during the pause. Where we see a lot of this is the moving pause, or not that definitive 2 to 5 second pause. And again, that if it's not the definitive 2 to 5 second pause of a complete stop, then it would then be classified as illegal or not legal. And then the bolded part there, the non-pivot foot must be stationary at the start and during the pause. So the non-pivot foot can only move forward once they have gotten to that stage. So any backward movement during or after the pause is an illegal action. And again, that was an infraction last year during the games as part of the trial period that we saw a lot of inconsistencies between our umpires and the calling. And then obviously once they've come to their pause and they start that forward motion, they can leap, land, and throw in a continuous motion. The pitcher's hands must be separated prior to landing. And obviously they must continue to step directly towards home plate within that 24-inch length of the pitcher's plate. So here's some still photos of a legal example for all levels. So they're just still photos that we found to show progression of a pitch. So the same pitcher coming through. During this example, the whole time her foot is in contact with the ground. So she's pushed and dragged all the way through. And again, this is a legal pitch example. Here's another illegal or legal pitch example. So again, she's brought her hands together. In picture 2, we're assuming that she has paused there for the 2 to 5 seconds. And then she has separated her hands and starts the motion going through. And again, all categories, this is legal, whether it be 16 and up. Just because the pitchers at U16 and above can jump, leap, and throw that way, they don't have to. They can still push and drag. So some of the pitchers that we see in our local leagues who have been pitching for many years, specifically the junior and senior levels, they may not change their delivery because obviously it's what they're used to and from a comfort level for their sake. And then again, finishing off her delivery. And again, that whole sequence is legal throughout. So here is a video of a push and drag close-up. And again, we're focusing on her feet only, not worrying so much about the hands. Oh. I will show this a couple times. Okay, but pretty straightforward. Her 2 feet on the rubber. She pushes and drags the whole way. And again, this would be legal from a pitching perspective. So here's an example of a U14 and down where it would be illegal. So in this case here, there's air in the third pitcher. There's air between the pitcher and the ground with her feet. Obviously, U16 and older, this is legal. Again, she has gotten air, she's landed, and she's now throwing the pitch. So while she lands within the width of the 24-inch, in this case, that's fine. But unfortunately, because of the air between her foot and the ground on a level playing surface, there's no trench or no hole dug, we would classify this as illegal for U14 and younger, and anything older than that, so U16 and older, would be legal. So here's some video of, again, another pitcher from a side view from like a base umpire, because again, this is the base umpire's responsibility, that this would be illegal in all divisions. And again, I'll replay this a few times. So again, there's a slight, and it's in slow motion, you'll see a slight move by her left foot to step forward just a little bit right there. Again, it's not much, but it is still a step forward. So the plate umpire, or sorry, the base umpire at first base would, when they see this on the first occurrence, would go out, warn the pitcher, and then, I'll just replay it here, warn the pitcher, and then on the second and subsequent offenses, they would use the mechanic to call it. So there's a slight step forward there.
Kris, I just want to make sure that people understand that they need to make sure that the foot stepping forward, it's illegal if the foot is no longer in contact with the pitching rubber. As long as the front foot is still in contact, they can't slide it forward. As soon as the foot is no longer in contact, it is considered a step forward. So be 100% sure that the foot is no longer in contact with the pitching rubber. That's really important because this one is really close, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. And that was part of the reason for this example, was the fact that this is one where it's almost the slow motion that helps us. So at a full speed, you may not see this initially. Again, you need to be watching closely every pitch. And again, not in contact. And then there's a step forward. That would then be recognized as illegal. Okay, and then another example is out of the 24-inch shoot, or the 24-inch violation. And again, this is a plate umpire call. So you'll see with this pitcher, she pitches, moves towards the first base side, outside of the chute. And again, it's her foot there. It goes sideways, out of the chute, and then throws. In this case, she actually replants and throws again, and again, I'll show it again. This is not a base umpire call. This is strictly the plate umpire's responsibility, because they've got the same sort of angle, obviously at a lower level, but they can see that the pitcher is going straight sideways and throwing. Where we see this sometimes, not necessarily in this case, but they might actually go towards a left-handed batter. If the batter was on the other side, they'll go towards them and then throw kind of cross or diagonally if it's a left-handed pitcher. Or in this case, the right-handed pitcher might go towards third base side and throw a cross to get a bit of a different angle and trajectory of their pitch to make it tougher for the batter to attack. The next slide, again, I'll leave this to Frankie to discuss from this point on.
Thanks, Kris. I think it's really important to remember before we get to this next video that stepping forward and the pitcher being out of the chute are not new. These are things that we've been adjudicating and calling illegal for a really long time. The new piece is the pause. So it's been super helpful to have video that you can see, but I mean, those are things that we're accustomed to. And so really the piece that I want to focus on is the pause, because as mentioned, it was something that I think was observed at a lot of different levels. And so, Kris, go ahead and play this video. This is an example of a legal pause.
I think, Frankie, also, just a side note here, if you have things that popped into your head for questions, please send them to us, something that you want us to cover during the question and answer period, so that we can touch on those for all attendees. That'd be greatly appreciated.
So when we talk about really, really good plate mechanics, there's a couple of different components to that. You know, we talk about being in the slot. We talk about having eyes at the top of the zone. We talk about tracking the ball into the mitt. One of the things we also talk about is timing. Not just the timing of your call, whether it's a ball or a strike, but the timing of when you go into your set position. And if adjudicating the pause is something that you had difficulty with last year and something you're nervous about, or something that is causing you to have a lot of thoughts about how you're going to adjudicate this, one of the things that you can think about is when you're going into your set position, if you feel like the ball is quickly there, that's a sign that the pitcher is not actually pausing, because you should be able to take a breath, go down into your set position, and then the pitch is being delivered. People that like to go into their set position early should be able to, like, 1, 2. Like, seriously, you should be able to do that and then be able to see the entire delivery of the pitch. So it's just a little tip that I've tried to implement into my own game. There's a certain timing that I like to go down into my set position. And if I feel like, whoa, the ball's here already, then obviously the pitcher is not pausing. And the reason I'm giving you that tip is because sometimes when we are, I'm not necessarily talking league games, but sometimes when we're in tournaments or we're in provincial championships or we're just in a game that is got a lot of things going on, sometimes those little basic things go to the wayside and we're not mindful of them and we forget the basics. So it's just a way to keep yourself engaged with this very important piece. Because I would suggest that part of the reason that this rule has been put into place is because the pitchers were taking a bit of an advantage in not allowing the batter to actually be set and be ready before the delivery. On the other hand, on the next slide, we have an example of a rolling pause where there really is no definitive, the body is coming to a complete and entire stop. Just going to play this a couple of times for you. So bearing in mind what I just said about trying to time, quote unquote, the way that you go down into your set position, this particular video, if you were behind home plate calling balls and strikes for this pitcher, this would cause you to go, something's not right here, because I'm not actually getting an opportunity to go into my set position. The ball is already there. Like, it just doesn't give you any time to take a breath before the ball is already in the catcher's glove. So it's just something that I've incorporated into my game to help with that piece of what you're looking at. You got a lot of stuff going on. We get that. You know, you're trying to make sure that the signal's being taken correctly. You're trying to make sure that they're pausing. You're trying to make sure that they're not going out of the chute. And then you're like trying to work with the catcher, and you're also trying to call balls and strikes. So it's a lot of stuff going on. All right. And I think to the last, oops. So this brings us to the point of emphasis for the point of emphasis right now for the 2019 season is we need to work harder as an ASUA umpiring community to enforce the pitching regulations as stated in the rulebook. I think last year, because we were on a pilot year, we worked really hard at informally working with the coaches and pitchers around the pause. Maybe it was because we didn't know if it was going to be, long term or, people are saying they can't hear. Is that people can hear? Is that okay? Or those old comments? Maybe they're old. Okay. Sorry. So this is now a part of what we are supposed to be doing. So we need to adjudicate it. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the reason that we wanted to start with this particular rule is that all levels from local, provincial, all the way up to international, this was an area that required a more consistent application of the rule across the board. So in the games that I did in Edmonton and the people that I worked with, the people I watched, and then the World Championship that I was at last summer, this was something that all umpires needed to be better at with regard to applying the rule. And it's really important that something that Kris mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily going to be on So the biggest area of concern that we're talking about is the pause. And it's not going to be on every pitch. So it's really important that we are focused and we're concentrating, because you should be able to identify trends. For example, some pitchers are unable to come to a full and complete 2-second pause and no more than 5 when they are throwing a changeup, as an example. So there's sometimes a certain pitch that a pitcher wants to throw that they just forget to do that, or they are unable to do it, or they just haven't practiced it enough, and it's not an intuitive part of their repertoire. Those are the ones that we really can't afford to miss, because it's part of the rule. And we aren't really doing the teams or the players or the coaches any favors by not bringing this to their attention, because some of them will travel to Westerns and Canadian Championships where they will have officials from around the country. And it's hard for teams to go to those championships and have something called there that's not being called at home. That's really hard. So we want you to work with the pitchers and coaches so that they understand that this is something that they need to comply with. We don't want 30 illegal pitches called in a game. Saying that, not calling it doesn't do them any favors, especially if they are traveling to postseason play. But one of our roles is to help educate. So take that to heart. And I think last year, the way that Terry Richter and Chris Hartley and I educated the instructors in the pre-season clinic was, work with the pitchers, work with the coaches, talk to them. But we did that. I think we did that for the entire summer, rather than, that first week of the season. Yeah, let's talk to them and let's try and talk them out of that. Let's try not to have. But once you get that first couple of games under your belt, we need to really, get out there, call time, warn them, and then if you have to call it, call it. Trust me, they will figure it out. So, and like I said, please remember, this is not something that is only prevalent in one city or one area. This is something that I just happened to notice, and it was at all levels. And it was the entire umpiring crew that I was a part of last summer that also internationally got that feedback. So I just thought that this would be, especially with the rule change, I thought it was a good idea to do this first. So with that, I think we are ready. I don't know if we have any questions.
Yeah, Frankie, if I can interject as well. Like Frankie said, last year was the pilot year, so there's a lot of education, and we maybe did it too much last year. But this year, it's year 2 for a lot of our divisions. So they've already had a year to prepare for this. Other than maybe the U16 girls division is the only real change, where they're now allowed to do it. There really should be no reason in our U19, senior, junior levels, U16 males, to give them much leeway, I guess you could call it, or much rope. Again, maybe that first week or your first game or two, just as a refresher, like, hey, just a reminder, this is the expectation. But after that, again, they've had a whole year of this. So they should be, obviously the U16s might include some players that have moved up from U14, so it might be new for them. And obviously the U16 girls last year that were pitching under the other style might have some growing pains. But as umpires, we educate them maybe a little bit more, but it's not on all-season education program. It's, early in the year, set the tone, set the expectations, and hopefully the rest of your season, because they've been told across the province and across the country, if they happen to travel outside of Alberta, that this is the expectation. And we're preparing them for those post-provincial play as well as provincially and stuff like that. So,
thanks, Chris. I know that from my own experience, if you're working with pitchers that are just not they have never, ever actually tried to do the 2-second pause, it's going to feel like an eternity for them. So I'm just gonna say, once you go out there and give a warning and you issue your first illegal pitch, they will improve immediately. Will they get to the full 2 seconds? Maybe not, but they will improve. And it will be something that if they're just not accustomed to it, then you will have to remind them. You know, just do that really friendly as they're either coming onto the diamond for the next half inning or as they're leaving. You know, I just need you to keep slowing down for me, you know. But it's not going to hurt them if you have to call an illegal pitch once an inning, if they just aren't getting it. Right? But like I said, we don't want 30 of these called in a game. We don't want to be the focal point. We want to help to educate. At some point, though, we do need to call it for them to learn. So if there aren't any questions, we will just go right beyond that next slide and go to, I just wanted to say a thank you to Haley Acton, who was the University of Calgary fastball player who took the footage and sent it to us. And the still photos come from the Cactus Umpires Association. And I really want to put a shout out to Daryl, who facilitated Kris and I using this software platform, GoToMeeting. Without him, we would not have been able to make this possible because it's expensive to buy the software, so ASUA couldn't afford it, and Softball Alberta is not yet in a position to, they were looking at something, but they don't have anything ready, and we were really excited to do something, so Daryl got his company to let us use this, so thank you to him. This was recorded, and so as soon as this is done, Daryl will be sent a link and that will be shared for people that couldn't attend, or if you want to refer back to it. Jeff Larson said he could put this on our YouTube channel, and maybe he'll send that out as well. And then we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So we did talk about the rocking motion, but just to reiterate, once a pitcher has, when they are in their pause position, okay, so once they are in their pause position, they are not allowed to step backwards and they are not allowed to rock backwards. All I would suggest to you, the rocking motion, you better make sure that it is like really, really significant, not the bum goes back because they're trying to actually just get into their pitching motion. Okay, like Kris said, if you are not 100% sure, do not call it. The most important thing with the pause is they cannot step backwards, right? They can, U16 and above, they can have their back foot off the pitching rubber, but once they come to their pause, they cannot back up again. And we have one other question.
Yeah, Frankie, if I can interject as well.
Yeah.
So like Frankie said, just to add on to that, until they come to that pause setting, if they want to put their foot back, if they want to lean way back and stuff like that, and then they come paused, at that point, everything must be forward, a forward motion from that point. So they can be leaning way back, bring their hands together, and then go forward after the 2 to 5 second pause, that's fine. But if they come paused and then they lean way back, or they move their foot back or some sort of backward motion, that's when we would have an infraction that would have to be addressed.
Yeah, I just don't want that pitcher that sticks their butt out to get right. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Like a full body, like lean. I understand what you're saying. We have one other question. What if the pitchers do not learn from 15 illegal pitches being called? Should we keep calling them? Like, great question. I honestly am hoping that a pitcher is going to learn, like, they're going to learn after 3 or 4. Saying that, we don't want a big spotlight on us. So if you've called a couple and you really in your gut are just like, man, this pitcher just is not getting it. Have a little sidebar conversation with the coach and the pitcher, right? Like I said, if no one from the other team, here's the other thing, no one from the other team is probably going to complain because this is still relatively new. So we want to call them to educate, but if you're getting up to the 9 or 10 mark and it is exactly the same, I think you also need to have some sidebar conversations with the coach and the pitcher. I think that's really going to help, because this might be a really significant change for some people who have been pitching for a really long time. So I hope that helps to answer that question. And I'm just gonna rattle on a couple of things while I'm waiting to see if there's other questions. But I just want to reiterate. Be 100% sure that you're seeing an illegal pitch. It makes it a lot easier to defend, right? I love that line, Kris. So thank you for that. You will receive, if you want to maybe go to the next slide, Kris, you will receive, this is our contact information if you have any questions or if you think of something after. Kris and I, our phone numbers, and then we have the education@asua.ca email address that both of us have access to. You will be receiving an email that has a survey about this presentation. Just please give us feedback. We will be as great as the feedback that we get. So please, be critical. We want to be really super good. So in that survey link that you get, please give us feedback. I can tell you the next presentation that we are going to do will focus on obstruction, and it will be slated to go either at the end of April or the first week of May. And I'm hoping to pick things to do that will supplement what you're doing in your clinics, or you can use them in your clinics. But once the season starts, really, Kris and I have chatted, and I think once the season starts, we might not do as many webinars, but maybe we'll start doing some kind of email communications with some things that we're seeing and reminders. But again, maybe that's something we can put in the survey. Do you have any recommendations and things like that? So a couple of other questions that have come in. I'll take the first one, Kris, and then we have a follow-up question to the feedback that I gave, and then we've got a great one about, and this came up at the championship I was at, so I'll take this one. So question about the first Dinos pitcher was legal with 2 seconds. When I do my count, I thought I barely got to 1. Is what she demonstrated considered legal? You know what? Everyone's going to have a bit of a different, some people are going to go 1, 2, some people are going to go 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. All I can suggest to you, if you can defend what you are adjudicating and you're consistent and you're fair, people will live with what you're doing. But you need to see a full and complete stop. So that's how I would answer that question. Everybody's counting might be a little bit different, but I will say if you actually don't think it's a full 2 seconds, ask the pitcher to slow down a bit. But remember, this is new for people. So if they are coming to a full and complete stop, the people that are going to have the biggest challenge are people that weren't coming to a stop at all. They weren't even stopping under the old 1 second rule. So that's how I would answer that.
Yeah, the next question was like, after 4 seconds, the batter requests time, what happens? So obviously, if a batter requests time and the pitcher's in the middle of their pause, because it's 2 to 5 seconds, and at the 4 second mark, the batter calls time and you the batter requests time and you allow it, well, then it's just like a brand new pitch occurs. And then the 2 to 5 second pause obviously would continue again. There's no, it's not like it continues adding on it forward, I think, but technically they have up to 5 seconds to pause before they deliver the pitch. So if the batter feels like it's too long, well then, and you grant the time, then it's obviously you continue like a new pitch would be, and start all over when the batter gets back in the box and you put the ball back and and stuff like that. So that was another question we had.
That's a great question. At our international tournament, we were told that a batter was not allowed to request time at that time. But I'm going to say this. The 2 to 5 second internationally has been around for a long time, so it's nothing new. And so I would suggest at the levels that we're going to be doing, as Kris said, you know what, if you're in the 5th inning and that batter's never done that before, give them time. If you've got a batter that's doing that almost every other pitch, talk to that batter and tell them that you will not be granting time once you're that deep into the pause. That's the way I would adjudicate that. Brad, I would assure you that Softball Canada pitcher-catcher clinics are absolutely teaching the new pause regulations. I would absolutely suggest that they are. And if they are not, then they're not following the rule book. So that's our job to help teach them.
Greg, you asked about more videos showing the stepping back and rocking motion. Again, with the new rule and stuff like that, we haven't been able to compile all those videos. I know we will. Part of our job is to collect more videos like that, so that if we do follow up or maybe send out some video clips to our membership, that is something that we are looking at doing with some examples. We don't have any handy right now that can help with that. I know as part of an ASUA education, in consultation with Terry, our UIC for the province, we are trying to get more videos at provincial championships, stuff like that, through the use of GoPros and other stuff like that, so that we can potentially have more video in the future. So that is stuff that we are working on for future seasons, to do follow-up webinars or other stuff like that. But at this stage of this webinar being new to us, this is what we have, and that's what we used. But moving forward, again, as a education committee, we are in the process of trying to have more footage at provincial championships, whether it be 3-umpire system, 4-umpire, all these other topics that we'll look at doing. So in the future, definitely we are looking. And again, if people have videos as well that they wish to send to the education at asua.ca from their own umpiring weekends, please do. And just, to help us with that.
And then we just have one last comment. I didn't mean to confuse anyone. The pitchers need to come to a full and complete stop for 2 seconds. So as long as, if you feel that they are coming to a 2-second full and complete stop, great. All I was suggesting is that people are going to, they might count differently. I understand what you're saying, Brad. I wouldn't be, if you feel like they need to slow down a little bit more, tell them that, right? I understand where you're coming from, because I just had a follow up to that. And yes, it's close. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with saying, I need you to just be a little bit slower. Yes, you're pausing, but I need you to be a little bit slower. So sorry, I didn't mean to confuse. The full and complete stop is for 2 seconds. All I was trying to say is people might count that a little bit differently. So it is supposed to be for 2 seconds. So, and so for the gentleman that's commenting about referee, I referee basketball as well. So all I'm going to suggest to you is, once people start to learn the rule, if they feel like you are not, so the question is, well, I can count 2 seconds within milliseconds, right? Like 1, 2, yeah. So all I would say is that once people start learning the rule, they will absolutely, if you're counting in their opinion, if your pause isn't as long as they want the pause to be, they will come and talk to you about it. And they will ask you, is that long enough? Is that 2 seconds? And like I said, if you're being consistent and they are coming to a full and complete stop, and you can actually, like, you know, not go super quickly, but I mean, like, you can take a breath and you can go down into your set position. You can sell the fact that they are coming to a full and complete stop for 2 seconds. We don't want to over adjudicate, but we don't want to let the pitchers get away with not pausing at all. Thank you, Brad. Brad just pointed out that the Level 1 Clinic PowerPoint on the Softball Canada toolbox, I'm assuming, has a slide which specifies that the pause is 1 to 10 seconds. I will definitely let Brent know that that needs to be fixed. So thank you for that.
And then, Mike, you had asked a question a while back about just a follow-up question to the one about the 15 illegal pitches, and they don't stop or they don't change. What do we do? Obviously, like Frankie said, we're going to try and work with them. It kind of falls on the shoulders of the coach at that point. You know, if you've called 15, I'm assuming most quality coaches would have probably made a pitching change before then or gotten to the bottom of it before you got to 15. I'd hope, at least. Or they're not doing their job correctly. But after you've talked to the coach and several more illegal pitches and the other team is kind of complaining, what then? Obviously, you have a job to do. Again, as much as Frankie has said and we've talked, we don't want to be the show. But sooner or later, it comes down to the coach doing his job properly or her job properly. And, you know, if you're throwing out your left arm nonstop, calling these illegal pitches, and runners are just getting free bases and free balls to the batter, you might end up with a mercy pretty quickly because you're going to be scoring quite often. So, again, we can only do so much. We're not there to do the coach's job as well for them. But, again, we try to, in the spirit of cooperation, work with the coaches and the team so that we're not being the result of the game and what's happening. It's, you know, again, but if they're continuing to do it after you've done 15 and have those conversations and everything else, well, that's on them, I guess. I don't know, Frank, if you want to add to that or not?
No, I mean, like, it's about communication, right? Like, we want to keep those lines of communication open. We do not want to be calling, like, 20, 30, 40 of these in a game, but we need to educate. So work with I honestly believe if you work with the coaches and the pitcher, they'll try and work with you. They really will. Yeah. Mike says, and then score the winning run. Yep. And that's why I love Chris's line, be 100% sure before you call it, because if you've got runners on, you need to know that you're advancing them. And I have seen a big game at a Canadian championship where the winning run was scored on a legal pitch call. So that's a great question. We have a question about strategies if your partner does not call an illegal pitch that you think is illegal. That is a fantastic question. At our championship, at the Women's World Championship this past summer in Japan, Bob Stanton asked us if we felt that there was something outside of our purview that our partner wasn't calling. It was our obligation to go and have a conversation with them. It is not our obligation to call it because we have our own duties depending on what position we are in on the diamond, but it is incumbent upon us to share that information with our partner. So I had a game where I was at first base and the plate umpire was not calling the pause. And when we went to get water at the end of that half inning, I went over and I said, the pitcher's not pausing, in my opinion. I think she's okay. Okay. And I went back to my position, and I have now done my due diligence and passed on what my perception and my opinion was. I gave her that information, and she can choose to do with it what she will. I will say this. You might have a coach that will say, is that pitcher not pausing? Actually, coach, the plate umpire has the responsibility to call that, so feel free to go and ask them when you have an opportunity whether or not they agree or not. Like, just so make sure that you yes, you can have a conversation with your partner if you feel that something, similarly, if the plate umpire thinks that the pitcher's stepping backwards, sometimes you can see a movement, right? But the feet are not the responsibility of the plate umpire. So they might go, can you just really watch the feet because it looks like they're moving after the pause, right? But really, that's not their call. So if the base umpire takes that information and they really don't think they're doing that, or they don't call it, that you've done what you can to try and help facilitate what you think might be illegal activity. Does that answer that question thoroughly enough?
I feel it does, Frankie. So again, we're 5 minutes to 8, or 4 minutes to 8, and we'd hope to have been done by now. If there's one last question, if there is, if not, again, if you have any questions after the fact, please email us at education@asua.ca or contact Frankie or myself personally. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy lives and schedules to attend this seminar, and hopefully improve your officiating. Hopefully you're able to get 1 or 2 things out of this seminar. We do appreciate the feedback that we will be asking for. The only way that we can get better, this is our first time doing this. We want to cater to topics that you want to learn more about. So in the future, so again, if you have ideas or topics that you wish to get more clarification on or improve on, again, we're just trying to add some value to you being part of our membership. We appreciate all the hard work you do on the field, and hoping that we can help make you better umpires for the games that you do and moving forward. So, Frankie, if you have any last words from myself, just thank you to everyone for taking the time to attend. And we look forward to seeing you on the ball diamond myself. And I'll turn over to Frankie for the last comment.
Yeah, just 3 things. One, if you've ever seen me present in person, I'm a very animated speaker. This was really hard for me, but I was super excited to do it. So as Kris said, the second thing I want to say, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I am really, really excited about this new way of trying to disseminate really quality instruction and material to as many people in the province as we can. And third, I just was laughing. Thank you very much. I'm trying to be really animated. I'm so excited. The third thing is, yes, we have committed to doing obstruction for the next webinar. Saying that, if the feedback actually shows that there's a topic that comes up frequently, Kris and I will definitely reevaluate that, and maybe we'll do, if there's something that comes up frequently, maybe we'll do that instead, and we will put obstruction off for a different time. It's just that there's a reason I want to do obstruction. So anyway, I can't thank you enough. And it was great to see some of the names of people that were with us tonight. I don't get a chance to see you very often, so it's really heartwarming to see your names on here. And I look so forward to joining you again in about 5 weeks' time for another edition of the ASUA webinar. And with that, we will sign off. Good night.